All right, and welcome back to WBCR 88.3 Saint. I'm Justin Kenny as always, and with me tonight we have not one but two very special guests with us. We have Sister Anna and Sister June. So thank you both for being with us. And without further ado, would you two like to introduce yourself? I don't know which one of you like to go first, but yeah.
Absolutely. Both Sister June and I are Dominican Sisters of Peace, and I am Sister Ana Gonzalez. Um, and I am now in transition. I'm about to start a new ministry. Previously, I ministered at our founded institution, Albertus Magnus College. And now I'm ready and excited to embrace a new adventure to work with June in the vocations ministry.
hmm Yeah, we're looking forward to that as well, Anna. And I'm Sister June Fitzgerald, and again, a Dominican Sister of Peace. And interestingly, I actually ministered in the Niskayuna, Schenectady area back in the 90s. I was stationed at the Dominican Retreat and Conference Center there, right on Union Street in Niskayuna, for a number of years in retreat ministry. And I was in retreat ministry for about 18 years. So, spiritual retreats, men and women coming for time to get away for a day, a weekend, an evening to get in touch with God and themselves and to refresh and renew themselves. So I did that for 18 years, and then I was involved in some leadership within our congregation and now have been privileged to walk and serve as the vocation director for the Dominican Sisters of Peace for the last 10 years now. And I live in New Haven, Connecticut, here close to our college, Albertus Magnus College, and live in our house of welcome. So that means I live with sisters who are entering our congregation, and I help them learn the ropes, as it were, and get used to being a Dominican sister.
Nice. Yeah, and then so one thing I know a lot of people kind of wonder is kind of how did the Dominican sisters come about? Like we all know about like Saint Dominic finding the Dominic or Dominicans. How did kind of the Dominican sisters come about? Was it kind of like a branch off the Dominic started? Was it kind of another woman came into the picture? How did the sisters come about?
The story goes back to the 1200s, and this starts with Dominic finding that there is a desperate need to evangelize and to preach to the community. The Albigensia at the time had a very dualistic model of theology that was very toxic, and Dominic was saddened about that. So he went and preached to people, and women were recipients of this message. So they became followers of Dominic. They embraced the gospel, but it was not healthy for them to be living out in communities where this toxic messaging and following the evangelization that Dominic shared could place them in danger. So Dominic founded first the cloistered convent for women. So he began with setting up places where women could pray, women could open up the word, and began this Dominican way of being. It was shortly after that, in 1216, that the Dominican order was approved. And then he went on and created this apostolic branch, this mendicant branch for the men. But from the very get-go, the Dominican order has been a collaboration and union of a familial sense of women and men. And the men were charged with the responsibility of caring for the women in the cloister, a responsibility that continues even today. Now, with changing times, and we're looking especially with the 1800s, especially in the United States and the Americas, and even in Europe after the Napoleonic Wars, there was a need for cloistered religious to meet the people of God and provide support, and many times within education fields and within nursing fields. So, for instance, in the United States, the Dominican Sisters, the first American community of the Dominican Sisters, were founded in St. Catharines, Kentucky in 1822 out of a need to minister to the Catholic immigrant population moving forward to the new frontier. So that's where the Dominican Sisters begin their ministry, and so begins to expand and move along. Other communities come from Europe. We have the famous Regensburg tree, which is a fabulous story. And this spans different communities from the East Coast to the West Coast. And then we have other stories of pioneering sisters that answered the call to go to the complete unknown and minister to Slavic and Czech and Irish and all French and all sorts of populations, all within the Dominican charism. So then here we see this movement of apostolic sisters, which we, the Dominican Sisters of Peace, inherit and continue to build on this tradition of going into the unknown, being women of the frontier, carrying the word of God and answering the times of the needs of the times. June, what else?
Absolutely. Yes, and you mentioned the Dominican charism several times. And the Dominican charism basically is the charism to preach and to evangelize, to preach the word and the word of God in all that we are, all that we do, all that we preach and teach, so that we're always spreading the truth of the word of God to others and helping to break down heresies, to bring the truth out. And certainly, truth is so very important always, and certainly from antiquity until now. We certainly need that. And then our particular congregation of Dominican Sisters of Peace actually has a very interesting history. We actually, over the years, we can trace our history back to the Dominicans that were founded in St. Catharines, Kentucky in 1822. And from that foundation, other congregations broke off, not because they wanted to, but because of geographic and different apostolic needs. And so, for example, a group went to Columbus, Ohio, actually Somerset, Ohio, to actually teach the children. And so eventually, because of the distance in 1830, you couldn't text each other. It was very difficult to communicate. And so over the years, different sections of the congregation became new individual entities. And other congregations also were working around the United States. In about the year 2000, maybe a little bit before that, a lot of the Dominican sisters actually had been working together for quite a while. They began to hear a call from God to come together to see if perhaps we could do more together as a new union than we could apart. And through a very long time of discernment and meetings and hard work, the congregations, 7 Dominican congregations, came together and created the Dominican Sisters of Peace in 2009.
Oh,
An
wow.
eighth congregation joined in 2012. So actually, our congregation has the heritage of 8 different congregations that have come together to create the Dominican Sisters of Peace.
Yeah, it's fascinating to hear that because one thing I'm seeing a lot with orders, and I mean, this happened at Siena in, I want to say 2018, something around there, is that you see a lot of the orders kind of now grouping all their assets and coming together. Like the whole, all traditions at basically the United States came together into one. And Father Kevin, who's the former president of Siena, was also the finance chair for the Holy Name Province on the East Coast, and he talks about how they brought it together. One of the challenges was like, yeah, we were coming together to pool our assets, which is kind of somewhat needed in today's world, but you were putting at risk losing an East Coast tradition, losing a West Coast tradition, losing a Midwest tradition. Um, Now, granted, they all did come together, and I know now the Augustinians are also looking at doing the same thing. How did you kind of preserve or kind of deal with kind of like bringing all those certain hair traditions together during that time?
I came in as a discerner the year after the Dominican Sisters of Peace came to be. And for me, coming in as a newcomer to this and coming in after the years of dialogue, I came into an institution that celebrated all eight foundresses, an
Yeah,
institution that gave me inspiration and the courage of these faith-filled women that went into the unknown, right? And their stories, like for instance, stories that I inherit because I am a Dominican Sister of Peace. And I have to say, I also love a good party. And every culture comes in with its traditions. And the Dominican Sisters of Peace have always been very intentional of being great stewards of the history, of the traditions, and of the celebrations as well. So I loved discerning in New Haven. And all of a sudden it's February, and guess what? We're having a Mardi Gras party. And then all of a sudden it's May, and we're having a Cinco de Mayo and Kentucky Derby party. All of a sudden it's March, and we're having a St. Patrick's Day party, and we're singing Irish jigs. First, so I'm originally from the border.
yeah.
I never knew about these fabulous St. Patrick's Day traditions, and guess what? Now I embrace it, and I will be the first one out there cooking corned beef and cabbage and singing McNamara's band. So um, during Lent, before Lent, right? Our Czech sisters or our foundation in Michigan, they had this beautiful Danish cake that we receive and we celebrate. So there is the rich stories
Mhm.
of how, grounded in faith, our foundresses go and met the needs.
Mhm.
Our sisters in Schenectady, they were very intentional about retreat ministry and providing working women a space to find the sacred and
Mhm.
to just have that grounding in God. This community became also the first American community to be a missionary abroad with missions in Cuba. And I
Mhm.
love that Catherine Drexel, before she founded her community, sponsored this mission by dropping off golden
Hmm.
bars.
Yeah, it was actually she had already founded her community of Blessed Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament, but she received a request from Cuba to send sisters, but she didn't have sisters to send. But she knew that the Dominican Sisters of St. Catherine de' Ricci did have sisters and wanted to go out further. And so she gave us some money to start that mission in Cuba. And so that whole idea of a lot of collaboration between Dominican congregations has been there for a very long time. But I think, Anna, you really described the way that we have begun to meld a lot of our different cultures together and how we continue to live those. And it was done in a very intentional way. We very clearly, before we became peace, we actually sat back and said, well, wait, what is our heritage? And we celebrated it and we identified it and we gave thanks for it. And then we moved as we came together, we shared that. Another thing that I think that has made our congregation really flourish is that many of our sisters from different foundations have moved around, have moved from mother house to another mother house to another ministry that was perhaps not from their original congregation. And so there's been a lot of coming together, sharing of ideas and talent and treasure as well. So it kind of keeps growing and expanding.
Yeah. And I kind of want to change gears here a little bit too, because I know a lot of people are probably, because I've talked to a lot of my friends about this, and they've and other things, and also probably listeners probably wondering, um, what was kind of your guys' stories with becoming sisters? Like, what led to you deciding to take part in this religious life?
hmm That's a good question. I'll go first and then we'll let Anna go first and go next. Um, I grew up in Virginia and I had never been around sisters until I got to college. And then in college, I met sisters, but I didn't want to belong to that particular congregation. They were nice, but I didn't want to be a teacher. And I had, right before graduating, I went on a retreat for young single women. It wasn't a discernment retreat for vocations. I just wanted to go on a retreat, to be very honest, to get out of the house for the weekend, having being home between my junior and senior year of college. And so I went on the retreat and I loved it. And I had never been in a place where the sisters are giving presentations and leading the prayer. And it was very dynamic and it was very uplifting. And during that time, I got to know some of the other women who were on retreat and we became friends. And then I came back the next year after I had already graduated. And at that point, I started volunteering with the sisters, a little here, a little there. And eventually, I began going to a different parish. And there I started hearing a little bit of a call that perhaps God was calling me to something more than just working as a professional woman for the hospital system and then the county government, that God was calling me to something more. And I didn't know what it was, but I started talking to the sisters of the retreat house. They actually had what we call a discernment group. And it was really helpful because it was men and women who were discerning what God was calling them to. And interestingly, there were about a dozen of us who were in this particular group that was run by our sisters, including our sister Ann Lithgow, who graduated from Siena College. He helped to lead this group. And during that time, a number of us discerned entering religious life, and some discerned entering the cloistered life. One gentleman became a priest. We have a couple people who went on mission as lay volunteers. And so God was calling people to different things. And yet, together, by being able to share our stories and to share our strength too, to be able to move forward. So, a lot of the people who were part of that discernment group went on to some amazing things. And I am delighted, I mean, really honored to say that I've been a Dominican sister now for 34 years. And I have done things I never imagined that I would. And God has really blessed me by having me move to different places around the country and to meet amazing people like Sister Anna and work with different people. So that's a little bit of my vocation story. There's a whole lot more to tell. One of the things I would like to say is that sometimes people say, oh, if I become a sister, I'll lose my family. I won't be in touch with them. Absolutely false. We stay in contact with our families and we're able to stay in contact with our friends. Certainly, we have the primary obligation of being a sister, just like people who get married. They have the obligation to their spouse and to their family, and yet we're able to maintain those connections with others. And in fact, I think Sister Anna might be visiting her family right now.
That's right. I am coming to you from my mom's house, and my mom's looking at me and cheering me on, bringing me glasses of water and paper to write notes, and being like super supportive, which to me means the world because my mom has been my rock and such an empowering guide in my journey. And I think her support for my journey has made all the difference. My journey is a little different and it took a bit longer. I first met the sisters when I was an undergrad at Loyola University, New Orleans, and the Dominican Sisters were not far from Loyola. As a matter of fact, one of the Jesuit priests whom I did work study with encouraged me to go to the Dominican Sisters, who at the time had a conference center and hired college students. So I needed a job. I went looking for a job, but instead I found inspiration, I found mentors, and an invitation. So at the time, the sister that I spoke with, Sister Dorothy Doss, didn't have job openings for me. But she invited me to come pray with the sisters, volunteer, and offered me to have a meal with the sisters when I went to volunteer. Prior to that, I grew up in El Paso, Texas, where I was really surrounded by this very macho, male centered society. And spending time with the sisters opened my eyes to a new reality. I was surrounded by empowered women who were making a powerful difference in their communities, who loved God, and they were just amazing. And they mentored me, they asked me questions, they empowered me to like go forth and dream beyond my imaginations. And I thought, wow, they're so cool. And I think internally I thought, oh, I want to be like them. But for during that time, I really did feel like an outsider looking in and being admired, just admired, being in awe of how amazing the Dominican sisters were. It wasn't until 10 years later, and keep in mind that the Dominican sisters in New Orleans touched my heart, and I was very intentional of keeping in touch. So every time I would visit New Orleans, which would be often because my sisters also studied in New Orleans and one of them actually lives down there, I would go visit and I would reach out to Sister Dorothy. And on this last occasion, I invited her to my little sister's wedding. Sister Dorothy's health was not so well at the time. So I think she was just straight out candid. And she looks at me and she tells me, I don't know if I could go to the wedding of your sister because I'm sick. But what's most importantly is, have you thought about religious life? And I think this question all of a sudden opened the door and invited me to be among the women that I admired. And it propelled me to really start thinking about, is this an option for me? Prior to that, I really was enamored. And of course, as a fabulous Latina, I grew up with the idea of I'm going to get married and I'm going to have a bunch of fabulous kids and they're all going to ride horses. Because I grew up in El Paso, Texas. Anyways, they're all going to play mariachi music too. Uh, and then all of a sudden, this other option that meant I would not be a mother, that meant I would not get married, but it did mean that I would be in love with God and the people of God. That would mean that I would be surrounded by the women that I admired and follow in their footsteps. It became very attractive, and I started listening. I think the Holy Spirit and the seed to pursue religious life was planted in me earlier, but it wasn't until this invitation, it wasn't until this time that I started paying attention. And God knows I needed obvious and very clear. God worked with me. So we have this invitation, then all of a sudden little things started percolating. Back in El Paso, after my sister's wedding, I was in an immigration march. And out of thousands of people protesting for just immigration reform, next to me were two Dominican sisters. My mom was coming with me as well, and she points out to the shirt of one of the Dominican sisters, she's Sister Reen Reeks, who wasted no time in engaging in me with dialogue. And then she had me over for dinner and was telling me about the Dominican Sisters of Peace, that they were the same community that I had met in New Orleans. And it just kept rolling. More coincidences, more signs, I want to call it, leading up to my birthday, where the readings and the gospel message were, I really believe, meant for me. And they were loud, they were clear, and that was my call. Shortly after that, I began reaching out to the Dominican sisters about the possibility of discerning with them. And I participated in several virtual experiences, began to love the spirituality. And then I went to my first come and see, and everything clicked there. I felt at home. I felt I belonged. But I mean, the decision wasn't made there, right? Of course, we
Yeah.
needed to discern, both the community and I. But that's where I knew this is home. I belong here.
Yeah. And that's one thing that I've noticed that there's not one true path to becoming a member of religious life, is that everybody kind of has their own way of doing things. Now, I've also noticed that there's been kind of a trend of people doing it later now. Like I've been told the average age is 27 generally for people, at least on the priest side, to join. Um, but one thing that's also been kind of occurring is that you've seen kind of a drop for some people with becoming part of a religious life, whether it be priests or nuns. Um, Now I've heard very different interpretations of why that's occurring, whether it be lay people now have more influence in the church after like Vatican II, or just society becoming more secular. Why do you think kind of that's occurring currently? Do you think it's now, of course, it's not always happening here, only happening here in the United States, it's also happening in Europe, but then other places are having kind of this too many people joining where they have to send them overseas. Like Africa has been sending a lot of people to the United States to be oversee dioceses pretty much.
Mhm.
Um, I kind of wanted to get your guys' thoughts on that topic.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, like for instance, I first began thinking about religious life when I was a senior in college. But then I was so focused by the cultural influence of getting married, having kids, going into a profession. It wasn't until I was 30 that I like paid attention, that I
Yeah,
started paying attention. And I believe that people don't take the time to pay attention and explore that religious life might be an option. And that's what discernment is all about. Entering into the possibility, is this an option? What can I learn and what is God guiding me? I also think that our current media is not very helpful to highlighting the joys and the beauty of religious life. It seems to me that anytime there's something with a religious woman, it's a horror movie. I think there's also a lot of stereotypes. When I began telling my family at first that I wanted to be a religious sister, they went into stereotypes of religious life from pre-Vatican experiences, and they would tell me, "Oh, but you're going to be so lonely, and oh, you're going to be so far away, and oh, all these myths and all these stereotypes." So I really do think that people need to, if they're curious, listen to that curiosity, be open to it, and don't fall trapped to the stereotypes and the myths. I don't know, June. What do you think?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a lot of what I would say, absolutely. And actually, Justin, one of the things I saw recently, because there are studies that are done on all of this, and one of the things that recently, just in this last year, I saw actually the average age of marriage has actually gone up to 31
yeah,
and of people in the United States and then the number of people not getting married also has risen. So there's a couple of things. I think one is certainly all that what Sister Anna shared. Also societally, people aren't finding or aren't feeling it necessary to make a permanent commitment, or people are afraid of making a permanent commitment. What if I make a mistake? Well, God allows U-turns. I think we need to remember that our God is a God of mercy and of helping us find our way if we make a wrong turn to help us go in the correct direction. And I think that's one of the other reasons. Also, there are fewer people who've chosen to go to church. Right now, people very often will describe themselves as spiritual rather than religious. And I always like to say to them, what do you mean by that? Tell me, what do you mean by spiritual rather than religious? And it's interesting because a lot of times it's very different definitions of it.
Yeah.
And so, yes, there are fewer people who are choosing the religious life, priesthood, brotherhood, lay ministry in the church. And yet, in different parts of the world, as you mentioned, there's an increase. And when we look back at the history of religious life, we see up and down in different areas, the flow, and depending on society, the needs, and all of that. And I think right now, one of the things I'm so aware of is that the need for people to speak out as prophets of justice, of peace, of equality is so needed. And I think when you have a spiritual base, when you have a relationship with God, whom I know some people talk about the higher power. I talk about God. And when you have a relationship with God, it can give you the courage, can give you the strength to stand up and speak out for what's needed. In years past, we needed sisters and brothers and priests to work in the schools and to teach. We certainly still need that, but our society has great schools, so it's not needed quite as much.
Yeah.
We need to continue to listen to where we're needed, to go there, and then when we're not needed anymore, to go on to the next thing. So and there's a lot of collaboration between religious and laity at this point. For example, here you are, Justin, you're doing this podcast for Siena College, and in 50 years ago, it would have been, oh, he must be a friar. Well, no, you don't look like a friar. You might be, but a lot of people probably ask you, aren't you a friar? And that's not always needed. There are a lot of co-ministers in all of our ministries for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, I can think back to my time when I was a student. I knew four people who went on to enter or try to enter religious life. One got turned down by an order. Actually, another one, I don't know what happened to him, but he's not a friar. One was supposed to be the diocesan for a few years and then got turned back because of mental health issues. But then one was, she knew from basically the cradle, like when she came out of the womb, that she was becoming a nun. And so she went to Siena. She spent summers living with different orders of nuns. And then she even left school, I want to say like a semester or like a semester and a half early to go become a Salesian nun. She still graduated, but she left early.
Hmm.
Um, but one thing I've also heard is that they're kind of pickier now with who they take. Is that kind of true, you would say?
Well, I don't know if I would say they're pickier. I think we're more aware of people who may do well in religious life and others who might not. I think there are certainly criteria that have to be met. And perhaps in years past, we weren't aware of, for example, things like if somebody has had some challenges in life and maybe they have an addiction. So they might need some help making sure that that addiction is under control, or I don't even know that control is the right word, but that they've been able to attend to that in order to get the help and to live healthy and whole. And I do think that a lot of congregations are just more aware of different criteria that should be met by people. And so I don't know if it's we're pickier or if it's we're just more aware of some of the things that could make it difficult for people to enter. And sometimes they've said to people, well, why don't you take a year to take care of whatever this might be and then come back? And so yeah,
Yeah.
we're
And one thing that I also admire a lot from June and the vocations team is that when they navigate, when they walk with someone who is discerning religious life, they want to make sure that this leads to joy, right? My mom grew up in pre-Vatican times and she had angry nuns as teachers, right? So she didn't want me to be a nun because she thought I would be an angry nun with a ruler, right? And angry nuns are a consequence of lack of happiness, lack of joy, and that's not who we are called to be, right? So I know that there have been women who have discerned with us who find their call with other charisms or with other communities. I have a good friend who started discerning with us, who now is an apostle of the Sacred Heart, and she's missioning in Ghana, and she's being her full authentic self. I have friends who are in other communities. They are their full authentic selves and they find themselves with the spirituality and the charism of the community. For me, I know I am a Dominican through and through. My life is grounded on the charism of study, the four pillars, right? Study, community, preaching or service, um, and community, of
Community,
course.
community.
Gosh, a very important one. It is balancing those four pillars that allows me to attempt to live a balanced life and to live a life where in community I am supported by my sisters. I am held accountable and I hold my sisters accountable. And together we walk forward preaching the word of God. We have to study in order to listen to what God is telling us and guiding us. Study is how we find God and we find truth. And this is important. I love to study. Dominicans love to study, but I know other communities are not so keen on study, and that's fine. And then, of course, the preaching, the carrying the word to the people of God. And this could be done in many ways from educating in the classrooms, in our learning centers. This could be from our physical and occupational therapists. This could be our campus ministers, our various ministries that our sisters are doing throughout the United States. And these four pillars, this charism jives with me. I cannot imagine life not being a Dominican sister. And I want this as an option for future women. I want religious life as an option for women who might be called to, let's say, Ignatian spirituality, and they might want to be Sisters of St. Joseph's or Faithful Companions of Jesus or Sisters of Notre Dame de Namur. Um, Mercy Sisters and that beautiful approach of compassion and hospitality. So, the beautiful thing is that our Catholic Church is truly Catholic, and there's something for everyone. And I want to encourage your listeners to maybe reach out to a religious community and find out more about them, to perhaps be curious. And who
Yeah.
knows, maybe religious life might be an option for them beyond the stereotypes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that this kind of harkens back to is that when I was talking with Father Rob, who was the actually the prior of, I think it's the Villanova province of the United States for the Augustinians. He's worked at Villanova for like 30 years. It's like their compliance officer, was like for the admission, not admissions, athletics, and was there for like Jay Wright when they won the national championships and everything. Is that he referred to it as kind of like a toolbox where you kind of go in, you have, if you like nature or serving directly with the poor, you go to Franciscans. If you're a preacher, it's the Dominicans or this and that. You kind of go into your, kind of just check out the Catholic toolbox and kind of see which one fits best for you. Kind of go for that. I
Hmm.
mean, for him with the Augustinians, he referred to it as the best being community and fell directly with the Augustinians. Um, but with this, I mean, we only have a couple minutes left. I mean, sadly, we only have about 45 minutes or 50, give or take. But um, since there is two of you, I kind of want to give you a little bit more time for this question. Because generally I like to end it on this question usually, which is obviously we've talked about a lot, and but obviously with a set time limit, we can't really discuss everything. But with these last kind of like 10 minutes or so, is there anything that we haven't yet covered that you would like to cover and or haven't gotten a chance to say? And if so, now's your time.
Hmm. Hmm. I don't know.
Oh gosh, there's when we talk about Dominican Sisters of Peace, when we talk about religious life, when we talk about who we are. There is so much. And Justin, bring in the coffee. Man, we could be at a table chatting for hours, right?
Yeah.
I love I love the journey. I love the adventure and in religious life and as a Dominican sister of peace, the community that I am part of, that I am navigating with a rich heritage tradition with sisters whom I admire so much. And each one of them has placed an imprint in my heart that I hope to share and continue unfolding this love with the people that I serve. Um, and it's just a joyful life. Religious life is amazing. Ultimately, it's grounded in love, it's grounded in joy, and it's grounded in the freedom, like authentic freedom and peace of following and living in a community where God is our core.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, maybe a homework assignment to your listeners. Find a community and a community. If you want to reach out to the Dominican Sisters of Peace, our website is opps.org. So that's the letter O as in Oscar, P as in Papa, and then peace, PEACE.org. But you could research any community and learn a little bit about these communities. And maybe talk to us, talk to the communities.
Mhm. Oh, that's great, Anna. I don't know how I can follow that, but it's so true. To leap, I think one of the things I would encourage people to do is to be brave and courageous and step out. We sometimes don't live our life because we're afraid of making a mistake or afraid of whatever it might be. Oh no, I
Yes.
couldn't do that. And yet I know as a sister, I have done things that I never thought. I never thought I would be leading retreats or giving presentations or going to some of the marches and walking with my sisters and other people to raise our voices for justice and for people. And one of the things I've become involved in quite a bit is the work for peace, the work for peace and nonviolence, peace and justice. And we, as Dominican Sisters of Peace, really believe that God called us and gave us this name, peace, uh, for a very special reason. When we were coming together as a new congregation in 2009, we had to listen to God and to identify ourselves with a new name. And so we had all different kinds of names that we were considering. And there were two meetings going on in different places almost at the same time. And the same thing rose up was the word peace, the name Dominican Sisters of Peace. And we really believe that God called us to be peace, to build peace, and to preach peace. When Jesus rose from the dead and he was in the upper room, the first thing he said to the disciples was, peace, peace be with you. And what do we need now? We need peace. We need peace not only in our homes, in our hearts, in our world, in our country, but we need peace all around the world. And there's so many places that are desperately in need of that. And we're called to help build that one-on-one with people in classrooms, in retreats, in standing up and stepping out and advocating for those who don't have a voice. And there's a lot of life to be lived in religious life, and it's religious life. And I think that word life is very important. I think our sisters are alive. They might be 90 years old, they might be 30 years old, and we're all alive and seeking each day how to live our life as best we can. So, yeah.
Yeah, and that's a great way to end it. I mean, sadly, we're out of time. Wish we had more time, but um, this has been WVCR 88.3 The Saints. I'm Justin Kenny as always, and with me tonight we've had the pleasure of having Sister Anna and Sister June from the Dominican Sisters of Peace. So, sisters, thank you for being with us.
It's a
And
pleasure, Justin.
It was an honor for sure. It was a great way to end the week.
No
yeah,
kidding.
and everybody out there in Radio Land, have a good one.